Okay, I will let you know when we will be ready. So one moment. Okay, so I think we are already live. Okay. I'm waiting for the sign of my colleague that we are live, but I think it's fine. So, okay. So I would like to thank all of you that you are with us. This is the event of the commemoration of the liquidation of the Litzmannstadt Ghetto of the 76th anniversary. And we are very happy that we have great guests today for this discussion. Unfortunately, our director, Jana Podolska, can't be just now with us. So I would like to welcome all of you. And just short introduction about the commemoration, because we just starting, and I would like also invite you for the main commemoration on Friday. It will be also online transmission on our Facebook page. And also I would like to invite you for the official concert of the commemoration. It will be the online transmission on Saturday, and everything, the whole program you can find on our Facebook and our website. So just feel free to be invited for everything. And just now, today, we have a discussion reverberations of Holocaust memory. It is discussion with children and grandchildren of Ghetto survivors. And first of all, I would like to thank you very much that you are with us. And I would like to introduce our moderator, Ellen Korman from Colorado. And her mother, Masha Goldblum, was born in Łódź and survived the ghetto, Auschwitz-Birkenau, and Ravensbrück. And her father, Sapir College, was born in Kozienice. From an early age, Ellen was drawn to Buddhist meditation, healing, dialogue, and peace work. And her book, Buried Rivers, it was also a meeting about the book during the last year commemoration. So thank you very much, Ellen, for this idea, for the discussion. And now the stage is yours, and please just welcome our guest.
Thank you very much, Elisa. Thank you very much to the Marek Edelman Dialogue Center in Łódź for suggesting the meeting with me and hosting it. So I'd like to say welcome to everyone watching and everyone here on the panel, and to friends in Łódź also, dobry wieczór I serdecznie witamy. Welcome. So just briefly to open, why we're having this particular meeting. So usually we hear a lot from survivors at these commemorations, and there is no replacement for living survivors to communicate to us the reality of what happened through their presence and their living testimony. And we cannot replace that. But with more and more of them growing older and unable to travel and passing away, there's also the question of how Holocaust memory will continue without them. So I'm very honored to be with this group today, each of whom has had at least one parent or grandparent who was imprisoned in the Lodz Ghetto. and each of whom has a very fascinating story, and each of them deserves an hour-long interview. But we will only have a short time, of course, to take up some topics. Each of us has experienced, we could say, an inconceivable discontinuity, discrepancy between life before and the life after. And we were born just slightly after, between, and this contrast between the presence of the life before and absence. So today they will briefly share something about how this experience has shaped their lives, and together maybe explore how they see their roles or responsibility as keepers of memory, in some cases recording what survivors could not even record, or as educators, or as people who want to help bring change. And also the relevance of this history to today. So I'd like to briefly as I can, introduce each person, if you'll bear with me. So Janet Bychek, blonde with a lovely tree behind her, is the daughter of 2 Lodz Ghetto survivors, which is a little unusual. Her mother's family owned a bakery in Lodz. She and her 2 sisters were deported to Auschwitz in 1944, like so many others who survived. They were deported to Auschwitz during this month, July and August 1944. And like many others who survived, they were marched to some other camp. One was shot. They survived, she and 1 sister, through various kinds of slave labor, through eating berries in the forest, and somehow they made their way back to Lodz after the war. Her father was from a Polish village near the Czech border. His family owned a grocery store, large family. Somehow he ended up in the ghetto, in the Lodz ghetto, with 1 sister, 1 brother, and his mother. And she was among the about 43,000 who perished in the ghetto, like my own grandfather, of starvation and illness. His sister married one of the Jewish police of the ghetto. They were promised safety, but they ended up being murdered at Auschwitz, like most others. And, but unusually, Janet's father and his brother were among the small group of 700 or 800 who were left behind to clean up the ghetto after the final deportation. And so it's an interesting story. Janet works in Boulder, same town as me, as a licensed clinical social worker and a therapist. So welcome, Janet.
Yeah.
Next, Miriam Friedman Morris is the daughter of Holocaust survivors David and Hildegard Friedman. Her father, David Friedman, was born in 1893 in what's now Ostrava in the Czech Republic. His first wife and daughter, who was also named Miriam, were murdered at Auschwitz. David Friedman was a prolific and very versatile artist. During World War I, in the interwar period, with studios in Prague and in Berlin, and during the war as an artist in the Lodz Ghetto and at Auschwitz subcamp Gleiwitz I. And also as an artist after the war in Israel and finally in New York, supporting his family as a press artist in advertising, billboard painter, etc. Just an amazing artist. His works are on permanent display in many Holocaust museums and institutions and are still being recovered. Miriam, who was born in Israel, lives in New York and facilitates exhibitions, lectures, and writes. She is dedicated to the preservation of her father's art and is currently writing a book about her father's life through art. So next, Dr. Liat Steir-Livny, I hope I said it correctly, is our third generation grandchild representative. She is an assistant professor and senior lecturer at Sapir College and the Open University of Israel. One of her grandfathers was a survivor of the Lodz Ghetto, labor camps, and a death march. One of her grandmothers is a survivor of the Warsaw Ghetto and Auschwitz-Birkenau. Two other grandparents fled to the USSR during World War II and lived in Siberia. Liat's interdisciplinary research focuses on the changing commemoration of the Holocaust in Israel from the 1940s until the present. She has authored numerous articles and 5 books, most recently including Remaking Holocaust Memory, about documentary cinema by the third generation survivors, and Is It Okay to Laugh About It? In 2019, she also was awarded the Young Scholar Award from 2 organizations in Israel. And finally, Erin Kroschmalnik, I hope I said it okay, from Munich, has pursued various professions, including literature, theater, pharmaceutical industry, and real estate. His father, Yosef, was born in Lodz in 1923. He survived the Ghetto, Auschwitz-Birkenau, a death march, and several camps, including Gross-Rosen, Flossenburg, and Dachau. His mother was from Tomaszów Lubelski, fled to Lviv in 1939, and was rescued from Siberia and brought to Palestine in 1943 as one of the Tehran children. Unfortunately, she died from COVID-19 just this March. For the last 3 years, Erin has focused on doing historical and family research, and recently he's been probing into some previously sealed records in German archives. Very interesting. Finding and studying newly available information about his family and about the Lodz Ghetto from German sources, Nazi sources. So it's a wonderful group, and I'm really honored to be with you. And I thought we could begin kind of looking back a little bit towards how it was to grow up in these survivor homes. So I'm wondering if maybe Erin could start, and then maybe Liat, and to share something about your early life in relation to this family history, how things were communicated or not, and just anything you'd like to share about how it was.
Yeah, it's a quite difficult question because I was little when I was born in '63. I remember, let's say, in '68 first memories with my father in Munich. He had already Parkinson. He got Parkinson in '63, so he was already sick. And I was like his father in a sense, because I was always with him to help him, and I had a little suitcase, red suitcase with me with all the things as child, and as he has not the capacity to walk alone and so on, so I would help him always, and he speak very rarely about what happened to him. I remember in a park in Munich, sometimes we went on the weekend, a sentence come, like fire in Auschwitz or whatever. I didn't know what he's speaking about. exactly in this age. But he was very warm, very lovely. And we had a very close relation, but no words about the past. So today I have like, I remember feelings more than facts or dates or locations. It's more a feeling. And in Munich, for me, it was normal. It was a normal thing. I was born there, and nothing disturbed me at the beginning. I went to the, I started to go to the school, and we had Zionist organizations in Munich. And I remember when on the Olympic Games, it was a terrorist attack. It was the first moment I was very close with Israel. And after, with the 73 Yom Kippur War, we collected money from other Jewish people in Munich. And what was quite interesting is there were a lot of lodge ghetto or lodgers in Munich, but very undercover. They meet together in cafes. It was like secret organization, let's say. They play cards. It was like a lodge, I think, today, all in Yiddish. And today, I think, okay, it was among all the old Nazis, of course, in Munich also, living same locations. Sometimes even, I remember now, there was a justice place where the court were, and I know today that there was also some trials in this matter, and there was a little cafe downstairs where all the Jews meet on Shabbat and Sunday, and there it was like little lodge, and on the other side, on the fourth floor, it was the trials of Ghetto Lodge or other things. So it's really, it's a little bit strange, but this is in the retrospective when I learn about all the things today. At the time, it was completely normal. And my father, he had this Parkinson's, so it get worse. And so for my mother, it was hard. We were sent after to 3 brothers to the Jewish boarding school in Paris. And so I visit my parents every 3-4 months in Munich. So this is a little bit a short aperçu about, yeah, how it was.
Thank you, Aaron. Yeah, and I realized after we had collected our group, how interesting it was that we had one person from Germany, from the country of the perpetrators, and we had one person from Israel, from the country that was formed out of the victims, you could say. So, so Liat, would you like to share anything about growing up, your experiences?
Yeah. So when you think about what the Lodz Ghetto means to me, or Holocaust awareness was for me growing up, we have to dive a bit into my family's history, because there's a difference between my paternal grandparents and my maternal grandparents. So my paternal grandparents lived in this small village in southeast Galicia, and when the war broke, the Russians came in, the USSR came in, everything was fine. And then when the Nazis invaded, they just fled into the USSR. Then they were deported to Siberia, and they were the lucky ones who were saved by working slave labor in Siberia and not being sent to the concentration camp. So they never considered themselves Holocaust survivors. They never talked about the Holocaust, nothing like that. So there was no Holocaust coming from their direction. My maternal grandmother, Guta, she survived the Warsaw Ghetto, Majdanek, and then Auschwitz-Birkenau, but she died when she was very young and I was little, so I don't remember anything from her. I only remember and know my grandfather, Moshe, who was a Lodz survivor. He was imprisoned in the ghetto until August 1944. Then he was deported to Auschwitz, from there to a factory, which he always thought it was heaven comparing it to Auschwitz, and then on a death march, which he succeeded to survive. Now, when he, after the war, he met a survivor, Holocaust survivor, and they got married and moved to Israel. and their firstborn, my mother, received this enormous name. She was called Tchia, which is revival. This is a heavy burden on her shoulders. Now, my mother tells me that until Guta passed away, Moshe never spoke. He never uttered a word. Guta spoke constantly about Auschwitz, about Warsaw, but he never spoke. And he started to speak only after she passed away. Now, I don't remember the silent years. I only remember the years he talked and talked. And I remember it because it was kind of a trauma for me. Because when Moshe spoke, he didn't just talk about his past, about what happened in the Lodz Ghetto, about his sister. He lost his entire family in the ghetto. One brother, which survived, was killed in the Israel commemoration war in 1948. So he was left alone in the world. And when he was talking in the stream of conscience, and you couldn't understand a word. He was just talking and talking endlessly. And as a child, I just couldn't handle it. I have to be frank, and I have to say that I couldn't handle it. I kind of built a wall between me and him. We used to sit at a table. He talked, and I nodded my head. But in a way, I taught myself to hear nothing. He was telling the same stories over and over again. He was a lithograph in the ghetto. Later, I've learned that he was paid in order to paint the ghetto's map because, like in Warsaw, they wanted to leave historical evidence to those who will come later. But I didn't know that when I was growing up, and I just built a wall between me and him. I couldn't hear it. It was just too much for me. And then when I was 12 in Israel, there is this kind of assignment that each 12-year-old must do. It's called Roots. And in this assignment, you have to sit with your grandparents and your parents and interview them about the past. And I remember that this was such a traumatic experience for me because I had nowhere to escape. And this time I couldn't seal myself or build this wall that later, much later, I've learned it was a defense mechanism, but I just had to sit there and listen and write everything. And I remember this event until this day. I remember the place where we sat down and he was talking and I had to write everything. There was no computers back then. And it completely traumatized me. And I ran away from the Holocaust for many, many years until I've reached university. And then things changed.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you. So interesting. So also to hear something from Miriam and Janet, not necessarily going back to childhood all the way, but just something about, emotionally or, growing up in your family, what you'd like to share in terms of, the strong imprint or strong quality. Either one of you. Miriam, would you like to start?
From a young child, thank you. From a young child, I felt that I lived a normal life. I didn't have any concerns. My parents, we would enjoy going to the parks and the zoos, and we had picnics. I played the piano, I played the violin. I really had a happy childhood, and I went to secular school. I joined the Brownies. My father was not happy about the brown uniform. I remember that. Mother explained to him that this is America. He remembered the brown shirts because he lived through that in Berlin. And basically he supported. My parents were very supportive of me. I always felt that by the age of 12, they treated me like an adult. But also at the age of 12, my father started his second series after he retired from commercial art, during the Holocaust. And now I was able to see him through the doors of his studio, painting and drawing. And these are scenes that were etched in his memory. Now they were on canvas and there was no escaping it. Somehow I absorbed it, and I can't say that I had any trauma from it. I accepted it. I don't know how I did that, but my parents were so generous to me and loving that it was just, you know, one of those things that I knew that I only had one grandparent. I was an only child. We didn't have any outside family. So it was just the three of us. And I always say we were like a unit. And we did everything together. But I never realized that this responsibility of my father's art would one day rest on my shoulders. And after he passed away in 1980, the reality hit home. I realized that I needed to do something with his artwork. It just, you know, this was in the, up until the late 1980s, nobody was really talking about the Holocaust too much. There were no Holocaust museums, no interest in showing the artwork. He had several exhibitions, but it wasn't like the young people that you want to educate were coming. It was the older, senior people that would come to these exhibitions. So the next generation that we want to introduce to the Holocaust, to educate them, to avoid ignorance and understanding, and to fight anti-Semitism. And this is why my father made the series. He wanted to show his artwork to the world. And he also wrote me a diary, writing about his first family. And although I knew all the stories growing up, it was written in tiny German handwriting, and it wasn't until I had it transcribed later after my father died did I really appreciate how much, you know, he loved me and how much he wanted me to know. But it also spurred me on a journey of discovery of things that I had no idea as I was growing up, and I wish I could have known more about and could have asked him. And I think that this is one of those that I'm still growing, that I'm still learning, and I'm still finding out about him. And just recently, you may have heard that an album of his drawings that he did of the hat factory workshop resort in the Lodz Ghetto turned up in the Warsaw Institute, Jewish Institute in Warsaw, Jewish Historical Institute in Warsaw. And I was completely shocked because they had the album since 1948, and I've been searching for it for the last 15 years when I found out about it. But still, it was such a joy that something from the Lodz Ghetto survived of my father's work.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
This keeps me going.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Miriam. Yeah. And now, Janet, if you could share what feels important to share about, the context and how it began to shape you, and anything you'd like to share about that, feels important.
I think, like Miriam, the beginning of my life I never thought was any different than anyone else's. All my parents' friends were also Holocaust survivors, and the children I played with were children of Holocaust survivors. So it all seemed very normal. But as I got older, I realized that because my parents were so traumatized, my response to that was to protect them. And it was very unconscious. And so I took on the coping strategy of, I believe, disassociation. So we just all shut down from all the feelings that were living in our household. Later, I called it living in a graveyard, because none of our relatives were mentioned. None of the pain was talked about. And it was only after my mother got sick when I was 13, had a stroke, and was not able to speak anymore, that I really became curious about what my parents' experience were, and started asking questions, which of course my mother couldn't answer, but my father attempted to answer in a way of turning it into jokes and then saying, enough already, and then that would be it. So I became very curious about what this whole experience was, and also what it meant in terms of our lives as human beings, and began to feel that there was a responsibility I had, not so much to the memory of the Holocaust and to the commemoration of it, but really to what creates human beings doing the kind of things they do, what happens inside of us. And so that was probably my interest in psychology and understanding the whole human condition and the human psychology. I think that became my interest in trying to create more healthy individuals that would respond differently to an experience like that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So so we're moving more into how our lives kind of express themselves as adults. And I wonder, maybe Liat would like to pick up where she left off in terms of what changed when you got to university.
Yeah, so moving on, now we're in the 90s and I'm in my 20s and I've enrolled in university, and I was interested in everything the humanities had to offer, but there wasn't any specific topic I was interested in. So I've just enrolled to several courses in literature and history, but I couldn't find myself. And then one day there was a window between two courses and I saw what's happening, and I reluctantly decided to take a course on anti-Semitism. I guess it sounded far enough not to scare me, so I went in. And after the first lesson, after the first period, I understood that this is it. There's nothing more interesting than that. There couldn't be anything more interesting than that. And the topic I ran away from came back to sweep me off my feet. And since then, I've been completely submerged in this topic of anti-Semitism and the Holocaust. I've written numerous articles and books. And in a way, my research, I guess for me, is kind of a healing process because, for example, through my research, I've learned about defense mechanisms, things I knew nothing about it before. And when I learned about defense mechanisms and I've researched it, when I've addressed this topic of humor and Holocaust humor, Black humor, gallows humor, I could understand myself better. I could understand what it was being a child sitting in front of an adult she loved so much, I loved so much, cries, who tells about his family and bursts out crying and speaks some of the time even almost gibberish. It's very, very hard. I could understand myself and not treat myself like I did so many years, just as the lousy granddaughter who couldn't listen to her father or grandfather, who was such a beautiful, beautiful person. We used to laugh that all the beggars and homeless people in the street were the richest people in the world because he was just giving and giving them. And I was just killing myself because I just couldn't bring myself to sit in front of him and listen to his stories. But then through my research, I understood that I simply couldn't. And that's okay, because sometimes people can't, because it's too traumatic for them. And this is why I think for me, research is so important for the next generations, understanding what collective memory is, what person memory is, what we want to learn, what we want to erase from our memory, how the narratives alter over the years, and how we can cope or uncope with these situations as individuals.
Yeah, that's a lot. That was a mouthful. By the way, I just want to mention for people watching, it's my understanding that through the Facebook page, if you are watching there, that you can write any questions that you would like the group to address, or if you want to address a particular person. But you could just also just ask a general question, and we do have some time at the end for some open questions. But we also have some more time now to continue maybe with this topic of how this history and growing up in this family as a descendant of survivors affected your life choices. Yeah, so would anyone else like to speak to that?
I could speak to that.
Yeah.
My father, although he did not speak about the Holocaust per se, he didn't speak to me about his experiences. And as I had mentioned, I did see it through his artwork. But one day he showed me some pictures that he had received of a very famous drawings that he had done of world famous chess masters. And he said, "You see, Mary, I was once a famous artist." And, you know, that made an impression on me that my father was a famous artist, but he had nothing to show me. And I felt that, what are you going to do? I was a teenager, and then several years later, I was in Europe, and I had found a painting that he had made of his wife. And I realized it kind of planted the seed that I might be able to find some of this artwork and bring him some justice. He not only lost his family, he lost his artwork looted by the Nazis, but he lost his promising career. So I enjoyed, that was, I think, my contrast to the Holocaust was to find justice for my father by finding his artwork. And I had a journey through Europe and Israel and around the world. I have found many artworks, often brought out of Europe by immigrants escaping the Nazis. And it has brought me a certain amount of joy. I feel excited that I could find these works and see what my father's life was from before the war. So in a sense, I was learning about my father through his artwork. And I think this balances the trauma of knowing that I was born, you know, as a second daughter named Miriam, which has a responsibility in itself. And I also speak about his first family. I always mention them. I researched every bit of his life that I can, as well as my mother. And I feel that I've done quite a bit, and I feel I've had success. And I think this is what keeps me going and keeps me sane, quite frankly. It's finding the positive out of the worst horror that, you know, that can be imagined by doing something that from the heart, to continue to show my father's artwork in the hope that, you know, that people learn from his experiences.
Yeah, thank you, Miriam. Yeah, it's this sort of recovery and restoration and justice of just putting back together who these people were, and also the tremendous wealth of his artistic contribution. Right. There's a question, by the way, Miriam, asking, I think, whether you are also an artist.
I'm not an artist, but my father would say I was. I did love to paint. He taught me a lot. And I was one time I was actually a fashion designer. I left the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York for a while. I graduated from there, but I wasn't in the business very long. So I guess I have the creative streak. Now my creativity comes out in trying to write his story, to tell his story, and also my mother's story. As much as I can. She was a survivor of Theresienstadt and Auschwitz, and she fled the death march and survived to a harrowing experience. But yeah, so I have a very interesting history. Thank you for that question.
And there are more questions coming, which is great, but I'm just wondering, Aaron, do you want to speak to this or wait till another question? We have a couple more questions, but
wait.
yeah, okay.
I'm so fascinated with Miriam's story. I have to reflect a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm wondering, Janet and I think perhaps Liat, and would love to hear something about what healing, we've heard a little bit, but what healing feels like, looks like, means to you. What healing or restoration or repairing this sort of damage.
I could speak a little to that. I found that I did a lot of self-healing through the process of psychotherapy and just exploring who I was. And in that process, I discovered what it meant to feel again, to open up to feelings, and how important it is to honor those feelings, because then I could become more conscious of what was going on inside of me, which allowed me to open up to love, compassion, feelings that I believe are what is missing in an experience of the Holocaust, which is really, I mean, of course, the Jewish Holocaust is so important, and yet there are Holocausts happening all over the world and have for all of human history. And so what seemed particularly important to me in the healing process was to get in touch with what it means to connect with the deeper levels of who we are, so we don't always go to our coping strategies. And that's, I believe, where hate and things like that get created. So just in opening up to love and compassion in myself and helping other people through that process, and what does that? Encouraging the things that are happening now, more like mindfulness training. I know a lot of what you're involved with, Ellen, also is moving in that direction of helping people to become more conscious of what's happening, so that we have more choices about how we are in the world and what we want to experience. And to answer one of the questions, one of the chat questions about creating our own families, that has been true for me, because I didn't have an extended family. I believe that in my life, I have created family wherever I go, in the groups that I associate with. And in that experience, I also look for people who do emanate the experience of love and compassion, and that's what I want to also emanate in those groups.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I noticed I'm not keeping up with all the questions in the chat yet, but I would encourage all the panelists to, if possible, read the questions in the chat, and so that you might choose to respond to any of them at some point. I noticed quickly there was a question saying that the two of you were, or two of us were therapists. In fact, only one is a therapist, just to clarify. Yeah, that's Janet. Yeah, does anyone else would like to speak to the question of healing? And there's this sort of issue of healing on the deep psychological level, but also how that transmits to the collective level. So I don't know, Liat, if you have something to share, or someone else.
Yeah, I'll say it quickly. I believe the Holocaust is in our DNA. If you're Jewish who lives in Israel, even more so. And I believe that my work, in a way, is my way of atoning for the past sins, my sins, the fact that I couldn't listen to my grandfather, that I couldn't bear with this past, with this trauma, with this tragedy, and now I'm drenched in it. It's kind of, I don't know, faith revenge in me or something like that, that it is a part of us and we can't escape from it. And it's coming back, it's gonna come back to sweep us off our feet in one time or the other. So it happened to me when I was in university. It happens to other people other times in their lives, but I think it's always there and it's going to hit on you in some point or the other. So dealing with it, facing the monster is a necessary step on the way towards healing. And I saw that there was a question about Holocaust distortion and so on, and I think that Holocaust distortion is one of the topics that really frightens me. And working on this topic, I've realized that there are two paths fighting it. First of all is creating as much as you can about the Holocaust and publishing as much as you can and creating films and so on. And the other way is exposing Holocaust distortions. And there are Holocaust distortions on a personal level, and there are Holocaust distortions on a collective level where an entire country rejects its past and invents lies about its past and so on. So this is a part of the healing as well, creating as much as you can about the topic so it will never go away, not enabling individuals and states to lie and create a fake history about their parts or their parents' past or their grandparents' past during the Holocaust.
I would maybe say some words also, because it's interesting with the Ghetto of Lodz. The more you inform yourself, the more you see that there are many secrets, and also there's a feeling of shame. I remark also on Facebook with some 2G and 3G of the Lodz Ghetto. It's a sort of frozen silence about the shame of surviving, I would say, or frozen memory. Because there are a lot of items like ghetto police, how you can survive Ghetto Lodz so long, who was Rumkowski, who was David Gertler, in which sense they help, in which sense they collaborate with the Nazis. This is a big, big issue, and I feel also in the next generations, there are some who are open to this. It's very painful, but there are some also who don't want to speak about, or who don't want to open the conversation about. And I think there are a lot of myths, about Rumkowski, for example, how we see Rumkowski, how Poland see Rumkowski. Sometimes today it's like rewriting the history. The Jews themselves made the ghetto possible, and Rumkowski himself was responsible for all what happened in the Ghetto Lodz, and he was evil. If you speak with Lodz people, a lot of times come item like Rumkowski is an evil, or Gertler, or the ghetto police. They were responsible for what happened in Ghetto Lodz. So it's very important, I think, to research also the proper roles of these people, especially of Rumkowski, for example. I have, maybe I can show one photo or two photos I have. So this is one photo, maybe you see it? It's a man here. See this man? And here. So these are all the same men. So I don't know if somebody recognizes him.
Sibo.
Huh?
I'm Sibo?
No.
No?
It's fascinating. If you make a questionnaire who this man is, probably 99% of the survivors or second G or third G wouldn't recognize him. He was the main responsible for the deportations of the Lodz Ghetto. He was before in Minsk in Einsatzkommando. He killed himself 30,000 people with the soldiers from the SS. And after he was sent to Lodz and responsible for all the deportations, he get also the president of the city from 42 to 45. And this is a trial I researched in the moment in Germany, or I was in the archives for a long time. I signed that I would not show something too much tonight, but it's about 18,000 pages from 63, which are not known. So in fact, a lot of things in relation of the ghetto of Lodz are not known until today. It's hidden. It's frozen memory on the victim side, but it's also frozen memory on the perpetrator side for so long. So you have these people who are really responsible. Because of course, he was in a gray zone, but he received order at the end, and at the end there were 9,000 survivors, or 10,000 survivors, I think. And we are, the reason why we are here is also it's difficult to say, but it's thanks to these people who were in the Judenrat. Of course, it's gray zone, but the main responsible was on the German side, and the names and the lives of these people until now, it's practically unknown for the public. So this is really what amazed me.
Yeah, and Aaron, I think I know the name because you shared it with me. Are you able to share it, or are you not supposed to share the name?
I can, but later when I think we will speak for 2-3 minutes about the trial, and I will share it later.
Do you want to share it now, or?
Actually, it's Gerhard Fuchs. It was the trial against Fuchs, and the other, I have to check 1 minute, I will give.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Let's see, so yes, there's a question, can you post the photos and information about this Nazi? I'm assuming probably not, because this is information that isn't officially open to the public yet.
No, but I don't, because I'm middle in the research process. Yeah. I don't want to go against the law in the moment.
Right.
But of course, in a few months it will be more, and of course, some of these biographies, if you Google, I will give the names after. You can research by yourself. But what was interesting, maybe I said 3-4 sentences about trial. This trial was in Germany in '63, and I read a book last year about something from a Polish historian. And I found that my father gave testimonial in '63. I was completely surprised. I called the archive and asked if I can get the testimonial of my father. And they say, no, it's blocked and so on. But at the end, I get it. And it was 6 pages of the life of my father in the ghetto. I never heard about before. It was like incredible. Yeah? And I discovered that about 400 testimonials from all over the world were put in this trial, but not only from the victims, but also from the perpetrators. You have incredible after-war history in this trial, from Adenauer's helpers until the main perpetrators, also of Chelmno. They speak openly in this trial, and it's about 18,000 pages. So I was for 2 or 3 weeks there, and I photographed about 14,000 of these documents. 4,000 were blocked until today, because you have, of course, also 2G and 3G Germans, which is not so sympathetic if they get in discussion with this and how to cope with this, what their fathers, grandfathers, and great-grandfathers had done. So it's why it's blocked always 100 years until you can freely access it.
Yeah, and his name was Gerhard Fuchs.
One is Fuchs, and the other I will tell you because.
Okay. And are you, just Aaron, what are you planning to do eventually with this body of research? Are you going to be doing, or do you know yet? Because first you have to actually work on it, work through it.
Yeah, it's a lifetime hobby because I have to print it out. So I start to print it out because it's on my handy, and I print out about 4,000 or 5,000 pages until now. I try also to make some, like for perpetrators, victims, names, so on, so I can contact later some 2G or 3G of these persons. And of course, I want to write, so I have different projects to write. So it's Otto Bratfisch, because you asked, so the one man, Otto Bratfisch.
Maybe write it in the chat in case it's helpful, because some people are asking. So I noticed in the chat also, some people are interested possibly in contacting us. So if you're willing to give an email address, maybe write your email in the chat, and I assume the Dialogue Center will pass it on if you are okay with that. And meanwhile, I want to ask, to more directly address the question of what is happening in the world today. Perhaps sort of victim consciousness turning into perpetrator consciousness in some cases, possibly in some some aspect of Israeli culture is dealing with that. But also throughout the world, here in America, with increased anti-Semitism and racism and hyper-nationalism, just this increasing polarization based on fear and sort of hyper-tribalism. And, some of the elements that Janet was talking about. Myself, I experienced very interestingly just 2 weeks ago, I was attending on Zoom an author presentation, and someone hacked the Zoom call and started drawing red swastikas and claiming the Holocaust never happened, and et cetera, et cetera. So, and kill all Jews. And so we have such an interesting moment in history, and kind of almost like humanity, another huge lesson for humanity to somehow shift. And just wondering how you might see the relevance of this history, because sometimes I feel like, oh, people aren't interested in hearing about this history, but there's something very real about the correlation or the, what's happening today, the echo today. And just wondering how you feel the responsibility and how you feel that we can help in some way in terms of the going forward, the younger generation.
Can I speak?
Please.
I just wanted to say that I think in order for things to change, people have to be able to feel empathy. And I believe that's part of what's missing. And what causes people to shut that part of us down is trauma and shame. And, as a child, when things happen around us, it's just natural for us to think that we are responsible, and shame builds up. And then so that trauma creates shame. And then we shut down and we go into fear. And fear is what causes us to do what you were talking about, Ellen, all that self-protection of tribalism and nationalism and separation. And so some of what I think the solution has to be is that somehow, and with climate change happening, and countries are going to be just having huge problems because of that, it's going to build people's fear. I don't know where the hope is, but for me, at least, it's going to be in us doing the work to build empathy inside of us so that we can recognize fear and not act on it.
It's a very good point, and but even last weeks when I see on the internet what happened, I'm really a little bit pessimistic too. It's important that we as 2G or 3G or 4G even try to research the maximum we can and to give the message to the next generations. How, I don't know exactly. Because today we are on TikTok in 30 seconds for the very young. So how to transmit all these messages from our parents to this very young generation. It's really hard task to understand how we will make this, but there's a lot of hatred going on in the internet worldwide. It's why we have to unify worldwide, I think also from the Ghetto Lodge. We are really amazing international community from survivors, children and grandchildren from the Ghetto Lodge. And it's an important message and we have for the next generations. But on the other hand, with all this rewriting of history, like Liat mentioned also before, I feel in every country in the moment it's a try to rewrite history in their sense of politics, whatever the politics is in the moment in each country. Through the internet, it's a strong initiative to rewrite history. And in this sense, we are, let's say, living samples. And we can maybe oppose this or part of it, what the governments and of Poland and Ukraine, and in every country you have this. Even in Germany, you don't have to rewrite history because the history was written in the 50s, 60s with the silence and with the help of the Americans. So the story is already done in Poland, Ukraine, and so on. It's really, if you go on the internet every day, you have this horrific rewriting of history, and I hope we can help a little bit. But the amazing amount of lies going on the internet, it's really scary, I think.
I agree with Aaron. We have to continue to tell our stories and never give up. We have to combat the deniers. We have to do whatever we can to show the world the truth of what happened. Never forget.
In my opinion, we have to continue to talk about the Holocaust because it's not something that happened and ended in 1945. I mean, the liquidation of the Jewish people ended in 1945, but the heights and depths of humanity didn't end there. Racism didn't end there. The ability to show empathy and mercy, on the other hand, didn't end there. So we have to talk about the Holocaust because it contains so many topics which are relevant to the here and now. And following what Aaron said, we must embrace the new technology. He talked about TikTok, and I know because my daughters are on TikTok each day, and TikTok is a super important cultural field. There are a lot of anti-Semitism there, tons of political debates on TikTok, and we have to embrace these new technologies if we want to continue and transfer the message and the story to the next generation.
Yeah, great.
I want just to add, because Miriam's father had also a fantastic thing to that even the younger understand very good is true emotion. For example, with the paintings, it's really emotion, what goes directly in your heart if you see the painting. And these kind of things with the emotions we have to, or the poems, literature in the ghetto, there are so many things that really are short but go directly in the heart of the younger generation. And this is amazing thing to translate without so many words, because we are used as in the older generations to make a lot of words, a lot of research, but now we have to try to put it in short messages that the people, even without words, they understand from emotions what is the humankind item of this, all this. It's not old, as Liat say, it's modern, because we are with the environment, with the pandemic, we are in the middle of a new world upside down. Sometimes I compare it to the 30s, where all the things change in minutes and seconds, and now the world is before a new task. And so our experience, I think it's very important to tell the world.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. And I want to say a word partly because there was a question on the chat. I think it comes from the staff of Centrum Dialogu, the Dialogue Center, that maybe I could answer about the fact that right now we are meeting virtually online because of the pandemic. But the Dialogue Center has been a really powerful presence in Łódź, in Lodz, and in actually bringing people together. And so for the last 15 years, I've been actually attending the commemorations there. I started visiting the city in 2006, and somehow I just felt a deep, deep sense that this is part of my being, this is part of my blood, this is somehow I felt at home there. But I want to just, encourage people that in the future, when it's possible to travel, that I think of course it's important to find ways to teach, especially people who don't already know the history. So we're not just, as we say, preaching to the choir, but also going beyond our boundaries. And that's partly what is so powerful to me about going to Poland, because there is amongst the Jewish community and amongst the descendants still a great deal of prejudice against Polish Gentiles. And for me, it's always just extremely joyful to feel connected to the place and the people in Poland, and to realize how much they are willing to be partners with us, and how much, I'm not saying there's no anti-Semitism in Poland, there is, just like there is in every other country, but there are also very deep allies because we have such a deep history together. I ran into somebody at a site of a mass killing near Tikocin, a little bit further away from Łódź last year, and he was bringing a group of Israelis, I think, students, and he said to me that Poles and Jews are like a married couple, with there have been some difficulties in the marriage, but still it's a very deep marriage. And so I want to both invite people to visit Łódź, and participate in the other events where you can learn a tremendous amount about the history of the ghetto and what took place there. But also beyond that when we go beyond just our own group, and we reach out to Black Lives Matter and to Muslims, and basically to realize that the tribal attitude is not ultimately the solution. We can maintain our own identity, but we can also reach beyond, and it's that kind of bridging that I think has tremendous potential to heal and to go beyond, because when people have an experience that they only think their people, their small group are human, then they can dehumanize others. But when you reach beyond that, you realize that everyone is human. So Elisa, I don't know if you're there. I don't know if you'd like to present any other questions, or if anyone else sees questions on the chat that they would like to answer. Hi, Elisa.
I want to add maybe a sentence for the Centrum. Dialogue in Lodz. I was last year for the 75-year commemoration. I met you. And I'm very grateful, I must say, about the people from the president of Lodz. I have nothing with them, but they made it really very warm, very sympathetic from the Centrum Dialogu. It was really a big surprise for me with how many empathy this was made. We were a week in Lodz and it was really incredible. People are coming and we had tremendous conversations together, lectures and so on. And I think these virtual conferences like we make today, it's probably the center as a good strategic point for the survivors 2G and 3G and 4G for the next couple of years to meet also like this, because today we are one world with the internet and also like with the economic and other things. And I think until now it was, we had the Lodz survivor generations in Israel. They react in one hand, in Germany and France and America, but now we need to unite it together. And I think the Centrum is a good point, a middle point to maybe to make more conferences like this, because we can share today, and we need to share, of course, our experience and our power in every country to sustain also Israel, of course, because today it's also a question what was before anti-Semitism. A lot of times today it's anti-Israelism, and we have to be aware of this also. So it's important that people who live outside realize that in every country we have good people and bad people. Like in Poland, with the election, we have 50% not so good and 50% good. So we have to communicate with the 50% good. I have always, when I speak with Americans on the internet, sometimes, oh, Poland, or it's this old pictures 80 years ago. Of course, there's a lot of anti-Semitism going on in Poland. Who will deny it? Also about the past with the Duda government, we have huge problems at the moment. But on the other hand, there are a lot of very sympathetic and very powerful people, young people in Poland who help and who try to communicate. And so it's like Germany with Poland is the same. There's so much blood between, but it's good to try to build new bridges and to forget about the old images from 70 years ago, how you can live in Poland, in Israel, in Germany, in America. If I look to the American situation at the moment, sometimes I laugh that they ask how you can live in Germany. It's really, it's an international thing now that we put together. Okay, stop.
There was oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I would like to say that this discussion is really very interesting and a lot of questions appear. And you can also see all the questions on the Facebook after the discussion and maybe just write some messages, because it's a lot of reactions. And also from our director, Joanna Podolska, who can't connect with us, she would like to share with you that we are planning a big conference. Just continue this topic of today, conference with the second and third generation, because this is really very, very deep and very, very important topic. So we would like to meet you also after the pandemic time, because now we can only meet you on Zoom, but after that we hope that you will come to Łódź to see our Survivors Park, also Dialogue Center, because you are very, very welcome. And we hope that maybe next year we will make a big conference in Łódź.
It's near.
That would be wonderful.
I look forward to it. Yeah.
And then also, I want to say that it's a possibility to plant trees in the Survivor Park. No, I think not so many know about your initiative, even when I communicate with other people. A lot are surprised that there is a survivor park in Lodz, and that you can plant trees for the survivor parents or grandparents. So I think it's also a magic idea, and the park and the museum is really fantastic, I must say. It's like coming home in a sense in this isolated area, let's say. It's really fantastic, and it's a good idea to plan something for our parents and grandparents and to meet there. It's a wonderful idea, I think.
Yes, we always say that when you have tree, it's your home. So this is a home of all of you. And for you that when you don't know that you can have also your trees. So every children's, grandchildren's of survivors can just contact us and plant the tree in the Survivors Park. So just please feel free to contact us, and we are just with you. So you are also very welcome to watch all the events during this commemoration. It's very a pity that we can't meet in Łódź, but we try just to make you comfortable to watch everything. So just feel free to join us during the events.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elisa. Would anyone like to say some final words that you didn't express yet that you would like to?
You know, I just want to say that.
And then go ahead.
My daughter has become a Polish citizen, and she has been playing for the Polish international softball team. And so it feels to me like there's a bridge being made, like Ellen was talking about, with the next generation. And she has found nothing but kindness from her fellow softball players. So that's how we're coming together also.
And I continue to show my father's artwork, but now with the situation in the world, I'm not so sure that too many exhibitions will be possible in the future, which is disappointing because the people, when they come to see the artwork, really feel my father's artwork, and they learn from it. And I'm hoping that there will be other opportunities in the future.
I hope that maybe in the future the Israeli airplane will go over Lodz, because we saw it last week in Dachau in Munich, where my father was liberated, and a few years before it was in Auschwitz. And for me, it's something really strong, symbol, and so the next plane landing is maybe over the Ghetto Lodge. It would be fantastic also for our poet who described that he wished was
I'll contact the IDF and I'll let you know.
Yeah, we will. I will try.
Yeah, so maybe just to mention some of the upcoming events this week. Elisa, shall I do it, or?
Yes, you can do it, of course.
I especially for the English speakers who are not able to attend in person. Tomorrow there's a lecture by, I think it's in Polish and English, on the liquidation of the Lodz Ghetto. Andrzej Gregorczyk.
Andrzej Gregorczyk, yes.
And I think this is noon East Coast time. And on the 26th, I think it's Wednesday, there's a lecture with English speaker Professor Robert Shapiro on the East Coast, who will be with Joanna Podolska, the director, talking about the Lodz Ghetto in diaries and testimonies. I believe that's at 10 a.m. Eastern time. There is the full schedule on the website, so I'm mainly mentioning things that are more accessible, perhaps. There is a lecture on the 27th at noon Eastern about Sarah Majerovich, who is an artist also of the Lodz Ghetto. The main activities, as Elisa said, are happening on the 28th, Friday. But very early in the morning for us here in the West.
But you can see later the transmission. It will be on our Facebook page, so you can see it also later. We have also movies with English subtitles. So I think it's many events also with English translations.
Yeah, so just check the Facebook page or the website for the full schedule. And yeah, so it's been a real honor and a pleasure to be with you all. And
Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you very much also from Joanna, many thanks, because she is all the time watching us. So it was really great pleasure to hear you and to watch you. And we really hope for the continuation of this topic in Łódź.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I stopped the streaming. Okay.
Okay, so we are here together, just us.
Yes, just yeah. It was a lot of messages, just private to you. So if you just can see the Facebook page, it's a lot of messages and questions, and it was a lot of reactions. So thank you very much. It was really great discussion.
Thank you. Thank you very much.